Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, More Than Response, Practical Applications of Emergency Planning at a College or University. My name is Abigail Boyer, Assistant Executive Director of Programs for the Clery Center for Security on campus. Moderating today are myself, our Program Manager Amy Guthrie, and David Fleming, Director of Marketing and Design for the Code Blue Corporation. This webinar is one of a series of free webinars during National Campus Safety Awareness Month, and we will also have a Twitter chat tomorrow on this topic, so we'll share more information about that at the end of the webinar. Amy is going to start out by covering some quick housekeeping items.
Thanks, Abby. You will all notice that there is a questions pane on your control panel, and we encourage you to interact with us by typing in questions and comments there throughout the webinar. We will dedicate at least the last 15 minutes or so to address these. We will also use the questions pane to communicate relevant information and links to resources that are mentioned throughout. As you can see, we've already linked to the slides in case you have missed those. We did send them out to most of you through email. If you're using social media throughout the event, please use the NACSAM 2014 hashtag. We've enjoyed a lot of the conversations that people have been having so far, so please keep them coming. We are also recording the session today, and you will receive a link to the recording within 48 hours, or you can visit the Clery Center on YouTube, where we will have all of the NACSAM webinar recordings. Finally, we will be conducting a short survey at the end of the webinar, and we would very much appreciate any thoughts and suggestions you can provide so that we can continue to provide you with the most useful information and resources in the future. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Amy. We also want to thank Code Blue for generously sponsoring this webinar, which is focused on building a comprehensive approach to emergency preparedness. We'll start out with our panelist discussion and leave time at the end of the discussion for questions and answers. As Amy mentioned, please feel free to use the questions pane on the side of the screen to share your questions and comments throughout the webinar, and we'll get to as many as possible during those last 10 to 15 minutes. We're also completely thrilled that today's panelists were able to join us today, and I'll share a little bit about our guests before we get started. Diane Brown is the Public Information Officer with the University of Michigan Division of Public Safety and Security. Her responsibilities include media relations and communications for police and security on campus, as well as coordinating the university's compliance with the federal Clery Act. Along with a Bachelor of Science in Journalism and a Master's in Business Administration and Marketing, she has more than 30 years of professional communications experience. Troy Harris serves as Assistant Vice President for Institutional Resilience at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, California, and as Chair of the Standards Committee for the University and College Caucus of the International Association of Emergency Managers. He developed the Integrity planning tool at and for Westmont, and some other schools saw and liked what he did, so Westmont now makes it available on a nonprofit basis. Andre Leduc's professional and academic focus is on the development of community and organizational resilience. He employs a collaborative, multidisciplinary systems approach that focuses not only on preparing the organization to respond to crises and disasters, but also on identifying opportunities to mitigate risk, prevent loss, and achieve the organization's mission. Andre is Executive Director of the Enterprise Risk Services Unit at the University of Oregon, which includes the Offices of Emergency Management and Continuity, as Environmental Health and Safety, and Risk Management. Andre is also the founder and administrator of the National Disaster Resilient Universities DREW Network, which those of you who are on our NACSAM list certainly saw information about that network this week. Prior to working as a senior administrator for the university, Andre served as the founding director of Oregon Partnership for Disaster Resilience, OPDR, at the University of Oregon's Community Service Center. So thank you all for joining us, and David, why don't you set the stage for the conversation and get us started?
Thanks, Abby. We understand that safety is an important duty, one that involves a wide range of people, departments, and tools all working in conjunction to ensure everyone is afforded the peace of mind of a secure environment. To do so, there are a host of factors to consider. When an incident occurs, you must work to go beyond simply keeping those around you safe. You also have to ensure that everyone in the surrounding area is also kept out of harm's way. Security is also more than just responding to a call for help. It's about providing the proper service and support to maintain a safe atmosphere. Reacting to an incident is only one piece of this puzzle. Establishing a secure setting also entails learning from what has happened in past to help prevent future incidents. Because of this, the responsibility is now on more than just your police and security departments. A variety of individuals need to embrace key roles to make things function properly. And so I think that's where we're going to start our conversation today. And Andre, let's start with you. Who should be at the table for those types of conversations?
Well, thanks. I think for that type of question, we need to kind of be able to step back and look at how do we structure our organizations, and knowing that not only do we need to have plans, policies, and procedures, but we need to have buy-in from senior leadership. So I always kind of look at this in the sense that you need to be able to make sure that your senior leadership understand what you're doing and not discounting risk or looking or exposure to specific hazards. So it's really kind of a top-down, bottom-up type strategy of making sure that leadership understand that emergency management, security, business continuity are primary drivers of day-to-day operations, and not something that you only look at when you have a crisis. And so for that, it's really important that we, as the professionals leading these initiatives on our campus, whether we're in the law enforcement side, the risk management side, environmental health and safety, emergency management, that we're taking the time to educate our senior leadership to understand what it is we do, why it's important, and ultimately how it's connected to the overall mission of the institution. And that, and again, developing these plans, the plans are important, but the process is vital, and the connections that we make to other entities, groups around campus is critical to make sure that things get implemented. Because if we just have a plan and we have something that looks nice and we put it on the counter and on the shelf, we know that that's only the start of the process. It's really how do we integrate and bring these components together. And I often, we hear about the siloed impact on our campuses and, quite frankly, in our communities. And I always like to say that it's less about the silos, but cylinders of excellence, that all of our different professional groups and standards all bring something to the table, and how do we sufficiently organize them in a way that effectively addresses the risks and exposures that we have on our campus, to not only manage crisis and emergencies, but again, to effectively address day-to-day problem solving. And so one of the approaches that we've taken at the University of Oregon, and something we've advocated nationally, is actually moving beyond just thinking about your plans, policies, and procedures, and building a team environment. And the next slide will show you is using we've used an incident management team structure. And for those of you who are familiar with the incident management team, you'll first, concept and incident command system, you'll notice on this graphic that it doesn't follow the standard ICS structure. Because the first part was, how do we make sure that we have equal representation from senior leadership all the way down to the ground for our team on campus? And so what we started with there was looking at how is our university structured, in the sense of what is the executive team, where do the vice presidents seat, and who do we need to bring to the table for our incident management team to help guide both the planning, policy, and procedure aspects. And so University of Oregon adopted an incident management team structure to develop all of our plans, policies, and procedures, and more importantly, cement solid relationships between the individuals that will often be tasked with responding to incidents. And the things that I'd call your attention to on this slide is, again, we looked at a broad representation of the campus so that it isn't just purely looking at a security function or police or emergency management, but having representation from research, student life, the president's office, enrollment, the registrar, advancement is really critical to how we as an institution think about responding. And something I strongly encourage all institutions of higher ed to think about is to think, again, if we're going to develop plans and policies, who do we have at the table, and have we developed the right structure? The other thing that's important to point out, and kind of the next slide shows more of the standard ICS structure, is that we are proud of the fact that we actually have a Type 3 incident management team. So after we had identified the people that needed to be part of this team, and the team meets monthly, is also making sure that that team and those team members are recognized by senior leadership of having the appropriate skill sets set at the national level. And to do that, what we did is we worked both with FEMA and with our state agency folks on the trainings that exist out there to make sure that we had type-specific people that were trained, so that when we pull the incident management team together, it isn't, if it's a student affairs issue, we bring in just student affairs. We're always bringing in our incident management team. And again, what this has helped is that we've had a significant amount of transition at our institution over the last several years. Some of you may have seen that in the newspapers. And what has held steady is the growth of our incident management team. And again, one of the things that I think has made it significant is that we are looking at how we can utilize this team not only to deal with crisis and emergencies, but day-to-day operations, whether that be developing new plans, policies, procedures, training. And a big part of that is who we've brought to the table, what we've trained them up on, and the fact that they have the ear of leadership, and most importantly, the trust of leadership to address really sensitive and critical time related issues. And so again, the other part that I think I'd spell out specifically on this slide is our liaison officer. So if you're familiar with an incident command structure and with an ICS structure, generally you'll have one liaison officer. In a higher ed environment, we actually broaden that out, that we have a lead liaison officer, and then we make sure that we have representation again from the senior level of our leadership on our campus in those liaison positions. And so when you look at the liaison positions for the President's Office, Provost, Student Affairs, Research, all those liaison officers are filled by chiefs of staff. So again, making sure that you're bringing the right people that have the authority and the trust of leadership to move forward, and then educating them on a model and a structure on how to address incidents or emergencies on campus.
Great. And one, thank you for sharing all of that. And we had a bunch of questions coming in of people who are asking if we could get a copy of these slides or of these charts that you've mentioned. So we'll absolutely make sure that you have the opportunity to do that. And just to kind of expand on that, because you shared so many good things, and one of the areas that you first started talking about was the importance of getting the buy-in of leadership and really building the right team, which you've laid out here. So Troy, I'd like to kind of direct that question to you. What do you think is the best way to get some of those people on board?
That's easy. Have a disaster. No, that's what we did, and saying that just a bit tongue-in-cheek, it does get their attention. I'm speaking from personal experience, though, that having people who get it really matters. But not everybody has a disaster to call upon, so you really need to find an executive advocate. Find somebody among the executive branch or level that gets the vision, that understands that it's achievable, that really wants to move in the direction, that realizes that the institution's reputation and assets are at stake. I get a sense that as more execs are now realizing the reputation value of readiness, the task of recruiting them is becoming easier. I think that's, there's a kind of a change in the wind. People are getting risk management more and more. There's motion culturally in favor of that, so that's helpful. To start translating that into reality, you'll need a planning team and a planning committee. I recommend something in the size of 6 to 12. Some organizations have up to 30 or more on the team. I don't know how they manage that, but it seems to work for them. But the general rule of thumb, I think, would be a relatively small group of people. Most of the grunt work that needs to be done to accomplish that can be it will likely need to be done by you, the person, whoever it is that has that responsibility for emergency management at your school, and any staff that you may have. But there are other resources that you can tap, and one of them is by just looking at what we have here on the screen, the 10 steps to ready. If you can get clarity of where you're headed, that helps a lot in the whole process. And so we recommend that you initially clarify, that we are committed to getting ready. And then there are these reflect, respond, and review stages that you can go through. Under reflect, you want to make sure that you're tuned in with the regulations and following them. You know what your impacts are, and you're focusing on those. You have thought through how to approach those impacts in the strategic level, and then you move into the implementation stage, putting plans into place and making sure people know what to do. And communication, of course, is so crucial. You want to give a lot of focus to that. And then finally, reviewing your resources. You've got a lot of capacity in terms of staffing and material resources, financial, things that are available to you to put into play when the need arises. You are going to get nowhere if you don't practice, practice, practice. A plan is not worth anything unless people know what to do with it. So the hands-on muscle memory is going to matter a lot when it gets right down to it. And then, of course, you're going to want to keep on getting the thing better as time goes along. So that's the way to make that translation from concept to reality. Among the other resources available to you, I think the next slide will show the UCC Standards Committee's results of our work. The UCC Crosswalk of Institutional Resilience Standards. It takes the 13 standards that we found to be applicable to higher education, including the High Quality Emergency Operations Plan produced last year by FEMA, the NFPA 1600, and another 11 standards. We mapped them to the 10 steps to ready, and so a school that is working on impacts today can go into finding the topics that are related to impacts and drill straight into the standards and see the accumulated wisdom represented by the years of expertise that have gone into developing the standards. So those are resources available for you. You don't have to figure it out for yourself because somebody has done the spade work on that. That really can help you. Another resource I want to talk to, we don't have a slide for this one, but is the DRU listserv, the Disaster Resilient University. That has been a very rich resource for me, a marvelous resource. And I recently had occasion to inquire about memoranda of understanding, and I very shortly got 24 people getting back to me with their perspectives and input and experience on that. So it's terrific to have that kind of resource at hand. It's a free resource, and really want to encourage people to take advantage of that. One of the questions that does arise is, how is the experience between larger and smaller schools, the same or different? Well, no matter what size of school, whether you're a 300-person graduate institute or a 40,000-person community college, the entire array is bound by the Clery Act. And so, and the 10 steps already are applicable to any size of school. In a smaller school, you may have fewer resources, but you also have fewer people to bring to consensus. Unfortunately for the large school, they have an exponentially larger minefield to navigate in terms of the political challenge of getting some things in place. But overall, everybody has to get the same basic things done. You just need to find a way to do it within your resources. And so by tapping the outside resources that are available, that can help leverage your effort.
Great. And so there are a couple of different themes that we're seeing here from what was just shared. First is really getting that senior leadership buy-in, making sure that they have an understanding of what the requirements are and what you need to do, and really operationalizing that plan, looking at who's on board, who's at the table, and who you can learn from. Amy in the chat function did put in that UCC crosswalk, the link to there, for those of you who are looking to that. And I know that also this week, as part of our National Campus Safety Awareness Month email blast, we included the information for that DRU listserv. So take a look at that email. If for some reason you didn't receive it, let us know, because that has a number of different links and other resources that kind of go back to what we've been talking about here. Now, one of the things that Troy mentioned was regulations, and we know that under the Clery Act, institutions must have procedures to annually test their emergency response and evacuation. So, Andre, can you walk me through how you design drills and exercises on your campus and who's involved in that process?
Yeah, sure. So, as everybody knows, there is a ton of federal and state regulations that higher ed institutions need to address. And so our approach has always been, again, looking at opportunities for things that we already are doing. So there's the basics, meaning our UO text alert system for emergencies. We do a quarterly test of that system, basically lighting all the lights. We have roughly 8 different modes, so everything from text to display boards to smart classroom consoles. But the other unique elements that we haven't developed for kind of testing our systems is utilizing them when we have large events on campus, whether that would be commencement or large sporting events, or really any kind of significant, like we're actually going to be utilizing some of our systems during our homecoming weekend, when we're going to have over 28 different activities simultaneously happening on campus. And so I think the number one message there is not only testing the system to see, one, does it functionally work? Is it performing the way that you want it to? But then again, operationalizing it into the day-to-day structure and operations that you have going on campus. so that when you do wind up in kind of an emergency or crisis mode, people are not shifting gears to a new system that they've never really had experience with or interaction with, but looking at those opportunities to actually bring those systems online to do day-to-day elements of day-to-day management and capitalizing on those resources. The other benefit is that buys you more ownership and buy-in into the systems. And so over the last several years with our text alert system, we've actually been able to work with IS and with other partners on campus in looking at how we're doing just general messaging to campus, whether that be faculty, students, or staff, day in, day out. And again, leveraging what we need for the emergency texting to be part of a broader system, so it's not thought of something as a secondary element. The other kind of components, again, part of this is operational. We've worked a lot with our central dispatch. Again, we're a university of 25,000 students. We do have a dispatch that is 24/7, 365, and making sure that our dispatchers have access to those notification tools and then are using them, again, not only for big events where we're lighting all the lights, but also for small things like water intrusion in a building, kind of using the same types of notification systems, and then it's just a matter of scaling them. So again, we've taken a very operational approach of making sure that the systems that we're bringing online both serve in a crisis mode or emergency mode, but are fully integrated into our day-to-day operations so that they're not seen as something separate that you dust off when you need them, because if they are, they likely will not work when you need them.
It's a really excellent point. Diane, is there anything else, coming from your lens that folks should consider when doing this annual testing?
Well, thanks for asking, Abby. I, at the University of Michigan, also coordinate much of our compliance work with the Clery Act. And so we're looking also at these kinds of things, obviously, as requirements for Clery. Sometimes when we're drafting and executing policies, the whole testing piece gets lost, but there now is a requirement that we must test our response and evacuation procedures at least annually, and they have to be pre-publicized. I remember a few years ago we wondered whether or not we should let people know in advance or whether that would be part of how we're testing, is to see what people's reactions would be if they didn't know a test was coming. But one of these tests each year has to be pre-publicized, and when I've been helping with some of the Clery Center trainings, we've been getting questions about from schools, well, we had an emergency on our campus, can I just document that as our annual test? Probably not, because you didn't schedule that emergency, and that is one of the requirements, is that it has to be scheduled. And you also have to have some follow-up. You have to analyze how well it went and how you were able to respond and what you were able to tell your community about that effort. Really, the goals, of course, of all this testing would be to not only make sure your systems work if there's an actual emergency, but also to educate everybody as to what they can expect. Because no matter how many times we try to put on paper or give a presentation to our campus groups about what they might be expecting, we know that in the throes of an emergency, some of those recollections go right out the window, and we have a bit of panic going on. So the more people that you have well aware of what they should be doing next and what they can expect next will be helpful. I know in the Department of Education handbook for Clery compliance, it mentions publicizing the tests in a way that will attract attention to this information. So, don't be afraid of even getting your broader community involved, not just your campus population. Our campus, though, as big as we are with more than 600 buildings, we're heavily integrated into the city of Ann Arbor. So it would be impossible for us to have an emergency on our campus that doesn't somehow spill over into the city or vice versa. So we have to be sure that we're also alerting our broader community, maybe a press release, certainly an email blast and different communication techniques that gets to the different sets of your population. And one thing you might want to look at is how might you be communicating with your students, and do you have a campus partner that might be helping with that? Say, for instance, can your student government folks retweet a tweet that you might send out about your test, and then it has their voice put to their followers as well, and so it can draw some additional attention.
I love that. So really looking at relationships. And before we kind of move on, I know David's going to really talk a little bit more about that proactivity, but I just want to highlight some of the things that we just talked about, and also apologize. I know we were having some technical issues during the last little takeaways piece. So just a reminder that you are receiving a lot of information within that chat area. Some of the resources that are mentioned by our panelists are being plugged in there, as well as some of the resources that were shared during this week's National Campus Safety Awareness Month email. So if you're not signed up on that chain, we'll have some information on how you can do that to make sure that you're plugged in. And you can also reach out to us so that we can make sure that you have everything that you need. And just some reminders from the last section. So one of the things that they really focused on is making sure that, in addition to the fact that it's a clear requirement, it's also really good practice to have some of these tabletops and functional exercises, and look at who you can get engaged. Andre spoke a little bit about how you can use events to really test your systems and make sure that they're working, and that they're really incorporated into everything that you're doing on a campus, so that it's not just something that you would use every once in a while if you have an emergency, but something that your campus really understands and is able to respond to, so that they are then able to certainly know where to look and how they're going to get information if and when an emergency does occur. Include community first responders as you're building these tasks. A lot of times it can also be a good practice and training for them as well. And assess and evaluate. So really a lot of the reason why these requirements are in place to not only have policies and procedures and to annually take a look at them and evaluate them is to make sure that if something does happen, you have a system in place that you have confidence will work if and when you have to use it, although hopefully certainly you won't need to. So just to continue to revisit those processes. So those are a couple of the takeaways. And again, you'll have these slides in the recording after the fact to revisit some of that, and feel free to plug in some questions into that questions panel if things are coming up so that we can address them during the questions and answers. David, do you want to move on to the next section?
Sure. A lot of what Diane mentioned was about being proactive, knowing that you had systems in place that you can use in an actual emergency. And so maybe, Diane, you could first start by telling us a little bit more about some of the systems you use to proactively communicate to your campus environment.
Well, to begin with, of course, getting the right emergency responders to a scene is the primary element, and we need to make sure our campus community also is recognizing that, whether it's police, security, fire, or hazardous materials folks, folks coming as a result of some kind of severe weather incident, maybe tornado, hurricane, etc., and being able to get those folks to the scene to be able to mitigate and or eliminate the threat. And then also, of course, dealing with those people right there on the scene. But then companion tools to be able to inform other people who might be nearby in your entire community could be very vital to helping prevent another occurrence, perhaps, or at least being able to keep people perhaps away from the scene. There's a lot of talk in the last few years and a lot of vendors coming to the fore with emergency messaging technology. I would just caution people to be sure that you aren't reliant on one particular mode of communication. Particularly in an emergency, multiple methods must be employed just to make sure that as many people as possible are getting the message, and that if that one particular system is down, you aren't dead in the water. I think Andre mentioned something about with the University of Oregon, they have 8 different modes when they're activating an alert. Explore with your information technology people how you might integrate and be able to utilize vendor systems as well as your own systems. We do at the University of Michigan send out an email when we activate our emergency alert system, and the email goes to all students, faculty, and staff. However, we recognize that in order to manage daily activity of the email system, they have to put a lot of spam filters and such in, and that's not conducive to very fast communication by email during an emergency. But we don't want to miss that opportunity, because some people will be very dependent on the email system, and the first few people who get it will indeed see it as an emergency communication device. But we also spend a lot of time encouraging our faculty, students, and staff to register to receive either voice messages or text alerts. We also have an integration, so it gets posted on our university gateway as well as our police website. We also automatically send out a tweet, and it automatically gets posted on a number of signs and computer screens around our campus. We have programs in place that have defaults so that those messages are on display for a default of an hour, and then we can go into the database and adjust that. So if it maybe only needs to be up for half an hour, we can adjust that after it's automatically gone out. But do have those redundancies in place, because cell towers sometimes get loaded, bad weather sometimes happens, you never know. And also, because speed is of the essence when you're communicating in these kinds of emergencies, be sure that you've got some standard messages already crafted, and if necessary, already pre-recorded. Hopefully your vendor or your system allows you to make a modification with pre-recorded messages, so you can, for instance, just drop in the time of the incident and the location that's being impacted. For instance, if you're sending out maybe a tornado warning, then you can put in there what the National Weather Service expiration time is for the warning. Or in some cases, you could actually be communicating the actual National Weather Service message directly to your folks. Don't have it be a convoluted chain so that it takes waking 4 different people up in senior administration at 10 p.m., 11 p.m. at night, or 4 in the morning to be able to get approvals to send out your messages. That goes back to the original part of this webinar in terms of getting senior leadership buy-in. If you have some very specific control of most of your daily messaging to your campus community, which rightly needs to be in place to be sure we're not breaching any protocols, you'll need to adjust that from an emergency standpoint. You simply don't have time to be going through a number of different layers of approval process during an emergency. And of course, once you've activated your emergency messaging, you need to then go back and follow up very quickly with either an update or at very minimum an all clear. And then be sure that you're putting out some information after that all clear that's more comprehensive. What really happened, and what more along the lines of what do people want to know. That all clear kind of is a message of, okay, everything is resolved and we can go back to normal business. But that needs to go out very fast, but isn't enough to really help build that confidence among your campus community. So be sure that you've either followed up with another message or at minimum informed your community that they should be going to a website or some other location for that follow-up information.
Thanks, Diane. That's really great information, and certainly points out how what seems like a simple task of just getting the word out is really a series of complex steps and checks and balances in terms of the content and the methods of disseminating it. Maybe, Andre, do you have anything you could add to that in terms of how you guys craft the message and then kind of what the process is for getting that message out?
Sure. I think to kind of echo what Diane was saying, I think that that first part is having a process that is not convoluted. So again, going back to the fact that we have an incident management team, I can tell you that when I have an incident, one of the first calls that I make is to our public information officer and PIO, and I feel very fortunate that we have 6 PIOs on campus. And again, whether you're a big campus or small campus, if you look around, you probably have seasoned communication folks that may, one, have actually gone through and are PIOs, or if they haven't, that would fill the bill. And it's just a matter of kind of getting them in the training. So the PIOs are critical in helping us thinking about that timing, the audience, the message. And so, again, one of the things when I talked about we try to standardize things into our daily operations is we also try to make sure that we have institutional knowledge, meaning if we've had winter weather or storm events in the past, we document all of that in all of the messaging that we do in our virtual emergency coordination center, and we through our after actions and debriefs, work with our PIOs to say, okay, what messages worked, what didn't, so that the next time that we have that need at 3 a.m. in the morning, we're not trying to craft a message or different streams of messaging to audience, faculty, staff, or visitors, that we can build off of what we've already done. And again, I think echoing what Diane said of that, there is a big push, especially with regulatory oversight, to get the messaging out as fast as possible. And so some of the things that we've tried to standardize is getting what we consider our first blast message out of, maybe there's a potential natural gas leak or something on a certain part of campus, that we will get the message out that might be very, very generic. And then the key is having a rhythm of, whether it's every 30 minutes or hour, depending upon the severity, we kind of set a messaging strategy in place to communicate as often as we can in different modes. And so some of that may be actually, again, using text systems. Some of it may be pushing them to, we have what we call an alerts blog, that with all modes of message, we push people that if they want more information, that's where they can find the official information. And then we try to make sure that that is updated and communicated when we'll update that on a regular pattern. So it's a delicate balance, but one of the things that I do think that is really critical is, one, again, get to know your communications folks like Diane and others, and work with them and integrate them into your system, and then start documenting, because most of us on our campuses have gone through these things before, and we know what worked and what didn't. What we've done with our PIOs is we've also, with the use of encrypted thumb drives, we give them all of the text so that they have that, so at a moment's notice, if we need to craft things, we can. And I'd further emphasize that, yeah, you cannot use your normal chain of command of trying to move things up to the provost or president for approval, and that's where what has really been valuable to us is having that incident management team that has the authority bestowed from the president to act on his or her behalf in the moment, and then we will catch them up from a policy standpoint. But we are not waiting for approval on messaging. We move forward with the messaging that we have.
Great. And it seems like so much of it, from what you were just sharing is, avoiding reinventing the wheel. So rather than every time feeling as though we're unprepared or we have to go through all this time of crafting language and putting the structure together, it's having those structures in place in advance. So some of the takeaways from what was just shared is really looking at an opt-in versus an opt-out system. So both Diane and Andre really talked about having multiple different ways to communicate with your campus community, and some of those systems may have a setup in which individuals have to opt in and provide you with their information to join. Some institutions also have opt-out systems where they'll automatically register certain information like institutional email addresses to make sure that they're automatically receiving some of this information. Promoting your systems, one of the questions that had come in, which we may even also get back to at the end, is how do students and staff know that the messages are real? So by promoting the systems, making sure that people know where to go. Andre just spoke to this a little bit in driving people to a certain place or a certain website where they know the most updated information is going to be. Really doing that promotion ahead of time so that they understand the technology and they know what to look for and how to use it when and if that does occur. Having a comprehensive approach, so looking at who you need to get on board. We talked a lot about PIOs, but also looking at comprehensively who at our institution would play a role in this, and how do we make sure that we're having those conversations, that they're in place, crafting messages in advance, which we talked about, and following up with information. So you're not just letting individuals or your campus community know that there's a problem without letting them know that it's resolved or what to expect or other information. So that's just some of the thoughts that we've heard And we wanted to wrap up with just getting a sense of how do we focus on solutions. So we know that sometimes there can be challenges in doing this type of work. But we also know that, as Troy was mentioning right in the beginning, there are a lot of different individuals with a lot of expertise that we can really rely on and learn from. So Troy, what kind of advice do you have for addressing some of these challenges and finding solutions?
Definitely some thoughts on that. I want to just step back a moment and underscore something that I heard said moments ago. You can condense down your outbound messages to 5 or so basic things, either flee or stay, or there are a few basic things that apply to the generic, to nearly any kind of situation. You don't have to already know your detailed facts, even a lot about the circumstance. You can at least get a message out really quickly to people, and then fill in the blanks later. So there's, we have it tuned at our campus now to within 30 seconds. Once we learn something, we can have the text and email on its way out, and then we can be building our plan. So there are ways to really help that process get moving quickly. Onto the challenges with this type of planning, I want to start with a little bit of expectation management. Building that plan can be difficult, will be difficult. There's not an easy way to pull your plan together. There are many pieces in the puzzle and many factors and many people that have to be involved. So even just kind of buying an off-the-shelf boilerplate solution isn't easy enough anyway. You can customize it to fit your school, but there's a lot of work, and so just anticipating that there's some effort and investment ahead for you. But all that said, it can be accelerated by tapping the outside resources that we've already referenced. The UCC Crosswalk, just one of them, the DRU listserv. And so you can take the simple ideas such as how to deliver a safety message and translate that into a functional and tested plan and a process that is proven on your own terms and on your own turf to really work. If you look at those 10 steps to ready, those are simple ideas, but they can, there's a lot of content behind them to help you identify step by step what things would need to be put into place in order to have that all fleshed out. The UCC Crosswalk contains that content that leads directly to those building blocks for a robust and complete program. Each of the building blocks is composed of steps, and the experts thankfully have gathered their thoughts for you already. That you really don't have to reinvent the wheel. So much has already been thought about. You do have to, though, apply it to your own circumstance and your own people and your own processes and your own constraints, funding and staffing capacity and so on. Just a couple of closing thoughts. One is that many of you have already heard this. I just love it. It's attributed to Dwight Eisenhower. Plans are nothing. Planning is everything. The focus is on the planning process and what is learned by the people working together and exercising with each other and getting to know each other's styles and personalities and kind of getting a bunch of that out of the way so that it doesn't flare up as a barrier in the middle of a difficult situation. And then I want to underscore that planning works in real life. When our campus was consumed by wildfire, we lost 8 buildings. We had 1 million square feet of landscape burned. It burned within 10 feet of the gym, in which we had 800 people huddled down in our shelter. The shelter process worked. The planning effort worked because the people who knew what to do did what they were supposed to do. It was just really quite beautiful, actually, to watch the gym mobilize into the shelter that we had intended for it to be. And we had all of that physical loss, but no human casualties, and we think that that was a result of the planning effort that went into that. And so we know that it can really be worthwhile, a real worthwhile effort to invest in that planning process.
Thank you, Troy, and that's a really powerful story. We want to make sure that we do have some time for Q&A, but Andre, any final thoughts from your lens?
Yeah, I think what Troy had mentioned, just kind of echoing that again, about the importance of the process. That often, I almost think that when we say, hey, we need to get a group together to develop a plan, you can just feel the energy kind of drain out of folks, because there are so many planning processes and things that we do on campuses that we kind of shoot ourselves in the foot of not right out of the gate explaining that that the plan is really about the process, and the process is really about integrating the emergency response, risk management, and safety and security into day-to-day operations. That it is not something that happens once in a blue moon. And so, a reoccurring theme that I see when I'm working with campuses nationally is those campuses that have excelled or exceeded in very stressful times, whether that be crisis from kind of natural hazard or just building issues. It usually goes back to, again, the relationships, the trust, and the teams that have been built. And so I'd say the key takeaway here is, if the plan looks daunting, we'll start with the relationships, start with building the team, and start with building a team that has the trust and authority within your campus environment to tackle some of these difficult situations. Because if we think that they're difficult now, I can tell you that in a crisis mode, they're only going to be that much more complex. And so to not wrestle with those issues and bring people to the table beforehand is it's a lost opportunity. And again, I've said it over and over, and I'll just again echo this concept of building kind of an incident management team is so critical. And the example that I'll close with and just share with is, again, we often think of this as something that law enforcement, police, fire deal with. The way that we're structured, a few years ago, we had a meningitis fatality in one of our sororities. Our incident management team was able to come together very quickly within hours of notification of our student passing, and work with Student Life, who's part of our incident management team, to be proactive in actually going into the sorority and providing prophylactic antibiotics and administering those all in a matter of 3 hours from the notification that we had a student death. And we had beat the local public health officials and others. They were catching up to us. And I really look at that as the strength of a team and trust of kind of not getting in the way of each other, but knowing, okay, we have a student affairs, a student life issue here. How do we, as the incident management team, and the processes and the planning and the talking that we've done, put that together to support them to have a unified mission and objective to address an issue on campus and ultimately the safety and security of our students. And so again, the team is so critical in my mind that you need to kind of focus on that. And the other part about building that team over time is you're able to build the trust and relationships so that you really, what we always say as kind of an entry point when we meet with the team monthly is, check your ego at the door. That it really is about the team is focused on what's the objective at hand, what is our unified mission that we're going to achieve, and we go forth and do that. And then when we're done with that, we go back to our day-to-day operations. So, yeah, planning is nice, but our plans are nice, but planning and the process really is everything. And again, whether you're big, small, or in between, building those relationships is critical.
And I love that sentiment because I think it's something that we've been hearing on actually all the webinars that we've done for National Campus Safety Awareness Month and all the different areas related to campus safety and security and supporting your community. So much of it has gone back to how do we work as a team, because we can put policies and processes in place, but if we don't know how to coordinate, we don't have the trust and respect to execute them well, we're certainly going to be doing a disservice to our institution. So some of the main things that even overall that we got from this conversation, one of the key things that I heard is really connect with the resources that are available. Amy has put links for the UCC Crosswalk, as well as some of those other links like the Drew Network that we shared for National Campus Safety Awareness Month. If you go in the chat function, you'll see links to be able to access those, as well as sign up for other elements of NACSAM in case you have not already connected with us in that way, and the International Association of Emergency Managers. So there are a lot of people out there that certainly have a lot of these systems in place that have expertise and knowledge to share. So learning from one another and really figuring out and asking the question, where did you find some of these solutions? How do I address these challenges is really useful. And then ultimately going back to thinking of the team, why are we here? What is the purpose of this group? Having structures to build some of that trust and building stronger relationships as a team, because ultimately that's going to have a strong impact on how everything is executed and really how you function overall. So a lot of really great thoughts. We also had a lot of questions coming in, and Andre, two of them were directed towards you based on some of the thoughts that you had shared. So one of the questions was, if systems are routinely used for non-emergencies, will this increase the potential that alert systems will be ignored when the emergency occurred? And kind of a related question that came in is, how do students and staff know that the message is real? So if you could speak a little bit more to how you use those systems in a way that certainly the campus still looks to them when there is an emergency and is paying attention. I think we kind of get the concern about the boy who cried wolf mentality here, and also how they know exactly where to look for some of that information.
Right. No, that's great, and appreciate the question. And yeah, so to be really, really clear, one of the things that we spent a lot of time on is we have what we call the UO alert system. So we actually worked with our communications folks and marketing on how we market UO alert, and we have a emergency notification policy that clearly states that the only time you will get a UO alert text message or messaging is in the event of an emergency or emergent situation, and when we do our quarterly test. So when I'm talking about operationalizing it, we actually have bifurcated our system that the UO alert is only, that's that red button that we push when we have to so that we don't have the oversaturation. But the system or the backbone on which it is built is something that we're using daily for communications out of our president's office. But there is a very clean barrier of, whether it's coming from the UO alert system or it's just general information. And so the message there is that we didn't want to have two separate systems. One that only police and dispatch use for emergencies, because our concern is, well, what if they can't launch? We wanted to make sure that our PIOs could launch, emergency management staff could launch, but the actual underlying system is used for a lot of different things. But that point about don't oversaturate, we are very sensitive to that. And one of the things that I didn't share but would be happy to share is we do have a comprehensive emergency communication policy that flat out spells when we will use what modes, so that we gain the trust of our campus that we won't cry wolf and we won't be using this to advertise, hey, sign up for class at the end of the week. So we have a clean barrier between that, and a lot of it has to do with how we market it, so that any of those other messaging, meaning if our registrar is using text or other systems, that it is not construed as something that is in the emergency notification. So we do our best. So again, the separation is we operationalize it with the people that have to use the system, so they're very comfortable with the back end, how it looks, how it feels, so they're not nervous when we get a call at 3 a.m. of, hey, we have to push something out, and you need to push a button that's going to notify 35,000 people. Making sure that those people that have to work within that system are comfortable with the system, but then being very, very clear of the only times that we're pushing a UO alert is either for the 4 times a year that we test it, or if we actually have a true incident that we need to utilize or use it. And one of the things, to back up on that, Diane brought up a really good point about notification and kind of when we test the system. We have always made sure that at least one of our annual tests coincides with our preparedness fairs and other activities that we're doing. And in Oregon, we have earthquakes, and so we do a lot of advertising around drop, cover, hold for earthquake awareness, and we tell people when we're going to be doing that text test, but we're also then using that testing system to get them to take action, meaning actually testing and doing drop, cover, hold exercises around campus. So hopefully that answers kind of those questions that, again, we do keep sacred kind of the UO alert branding, and even how it's used in the exclamation point, that there are only we only use that when there's an emergency or we're testing the full system.
Great. No, I think that provides a lot of clarity. Another question came in, and this one was primarily targeted towards Diane, although I imagine that Troy and Andre, you might have some thoughts on this as well. But one of the things that they mentioned is Diane, you talked about that your institution sends messages through Twitter and through social media, and they just like a little bit more information about how this is set up or what that process looks like if somebody is incorporating that kind of a system.
Sure. You can do a couple of different methods through your IT folks. You can do manually, somebody's assigned to get on Twitter and send a portion of your message and aim it back at, for instance, a website location. Or what we're attempting to do is integrate all of our initial communication devices into essentially one message that goes through a vendor. It populates out to the email, voice, and text messages, but one of those populates our website, which then creates an RSS feed, which is web technology lingo that I'd refer you to your IT folk. And the RSS feed then populates these other modes, including an automated tweet. Last week, however, we had to activate our emergency alert for an incident on campus that turned out to be a misunderstanding of what was going on, but that's okay. We activated our system. But one of our websites is on a Google platform, and Google crashed the site with a bug in the system. And we're very dependent on a lot of our website being the primary location that funnels out the information. So knowing the website was down when we knew the all clear was about to come out, and that because we had just launched 102,000 messages 5 minutes before, and now we're about to do an all clear, I just went in and manually tweeted out that we had canceled that 8:59 a.m. Alert at 9:03. So the specificity of time that you can get into your messages is also going to help the community believe that they are actual messages. And I think one other tidbit to take away is making sure that your locations are as specific as possible, knowing that you've got a real character count constraint. I remember being in one of our Clery Center training sessions and having somebody mention that within just a few miles of their institution, there were 2 other institutions, and all 3 of them had one building name that was the same name on each of the 3 campuses. So being very clear about that it's coming from your institution will also help people know indeed how it's being perceived. Use your lingo that you normally would, meaning some phishing will maybe abbreviate your school name differently, and that will maybe be a trigger for people to recognize that that's not a real message.
Great. And that's really important insight, definitely to think about the different ways that you might choose to incorporate social media, whether it's through a particular system or even manually having somebody who's able to do that. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us for the webinar and all of the questions. It looks like we are just about out of time. So first of all, thank you again to Code Blue Corporation for sponsoring the webinar and to all of today's panelists. As a reminder, in your chat panel, you'll see a link not only to all of those resources. You might want to take a look at that now, but also doing an evaluation for today's webinar. So we'd really appreciate if you take a few short minutes just to share your thoughts and your feedback. We'd love to know what kind of content you'd like to see more of as we plan additional webinars throughout the year. We also hope you'll be able to join us for tomorrow's Twitter chat, which is focused on how campuses can create a comprehensive emergency response program, speaking of social media. In this online discussion, we'll highlight the planning, notification, and training exercises required under the Clery Act, delve a little bit more into that like we did today, as well as crowdsource ideas from experts, practitioners, and yourselves for building policies and processes that are tailored to your campus. So we talked a lot today about learning from other practitioners, certainly learning from the folks on your campus. So this is one way that we're going to use social media in order to do that. So you can tweet with us from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow using the hashtag CleryEM, and be sure to follow us on Twitter to stay up to date during NACSAM and beyond. So this webinar was just one of 7 different webinars that our organization has organized for National Campus Safety Awareness Month. So you can visit our website at www.clerycenter.org to register for our 2 remaining webinars. We have one coming up next week and then again on the 2nd, and sign up to receive weekly professional development emails during National Campus Safety Awareness Month. You can find that information by visiting the Education tab on our homepage and by clicking on the NACSAM 2014 tab. We also encourage you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the Clery Center handle, as we mentioned, for daily campus safety information. We've been doing regular updates throughout the month. This webinar was recorded, and so that recording will be shared online and also emailed to each of you within 48 hours. And if you have any questions, as we mentioned on the screen is an email address. Please, please, please feel free to reach out to us using that email address. We can certainly follow up, get you answers from us, or if you have questions to direct to the panelists, we can certainly pass those along as well. So thank you again for joining us all today, and we hope you all have a really great day.